Good morning and welcome back to Morsels and Motors, and in today's episode on the Fiesta I've got a little bit of an update and I suppose cracking on with a few jobs again, as is often the case. Let's make a start. Since the end of the last video I decided to brave taking the car out on the road a few times, just to the estate around the corner, just to kind of make sure that what I'd set up on the carburettor was right. Seemed to be okay. So I bravely went a tiny bit further to the petrol station because obviously the fuel gauge was registering below empty, having just had a couple of jerry cans poured into it from empty. So I went to the petrol station, filled it with petrol, or well, half up with petrol, and drove home, and it was okay. It didn't cut out, it ran fine, so I was pretty happy. Had to do a couple of little adjustments to the carb. I think the idle was a touch high, so I turned that down a little bit. And since then, it does seem to be generally behaving, so I'm very pleased. There's then been a couple of weeks wait whilst I've been waiting for some tyres. I know there are some other jobs I could have been getting on with, brakes and that kind of thing, but I had other things in my life going on that I needed to deal with, and it was being incredibly hot, and I just couldn't quite be bothered to start stripping brakes in 30-degree searing sunshine. So, my tyres finally arrived from Germany a couple of days ago, and yesterday I went to Fast Fit in Arbury, North Cambridge to get them fitted. So I finally have a full set of rubber that was made not only in this decade but in this century, because the ones on the car were dated 1992. So yeah, that's why I really was not prepared to drive it any distance until it had some new rubber on it. You'll see behind me in the passenger seat there are two bits of exhaust pipe, so that is another thing I have purchased, a front and rear exhaust, because having driven the car down the road into the petrol station, etc., it became immediately very clear that the exhaust pipe, or the silencer certainly, was no longer fit for purpose. It's very loud. I feel like a boy racer. So I've bought a full new exhaust system. It's a Clarius system, so in this video I'm going to see if I can get that fitted too. However, yesterday's drive to the garage to get the tyres fitted revealed the fact that it really doesn't like starting from hot, and I have a feeling that that's because of where I've put my fuel filter, causing fuel vaporization, because it's right behind the engine, gets no cooling. So I'm going to move that. I spoke to a guy at a classic car show a couple of weeks ago at Luton who had a lovely blue Mk1 Fiesta that he had put all the accessories that except Fiestas came with onto, and he'd had it for about 26 years, so it's fab. And it was in really nice condition. Anyway, we chatted for ages, and one of the things he showed me was where he'd put his fuel filter, which is a much better position than what I have done. So I am going to see if I can improve things. Let's get to it. So you can see where my current fuel filter is hiding behind the engine there, and I think it's creating a bit of fuel vaporization when the engine's hot, and so it really doesn't like hot starting. So I'm going to see if I can fit it into the feed out of the fuel pump about here, and then go into the carburettor through there. Currently that's that pipe here. I'll see if I can do that. I'm not going to film me doing exactly all of that, because it's really not very exciting unscrewing things and cutting pipes, but I will cut in a few seconds to see what progress I've managed to make. Well, that was awkward. All the clips were right so-and-so's to get off and back on again, but anyway, I've done them. So that's now just a simple line from the feed to the pump, and then the pump, it kind of twiddles over here to a fuel filter which is hanging in mid-air, so it gets nice airflow to cool it from the fan, and then pops up to the carburettor. So let's see whether the car now runs. Okay, starts with the new fuel filter system, so that's good. I will go and take it now to get the exhaust fitted, and then we will see whether it hot starts in the garage. one. See if we can get the other.
It is moving very, very slightly. The exhaust is slightly moving with it though.
Oh, is it? Ah, that's what's going on. Oh well, it snapped. That'll do.
There you go.
Doesn't matter. Does the job. Second bolt snapped, but that doesn't matter because the whole thing's being replaced and the exhaust is kind of just falling on the floor. Nice. Okay. Right, bolts in place. So, Clarius have made two ends the same size for the back box and the downpipe. There's no flare. On the old one, there's a flare, so it fits over the downpipe. So we've had to make a collar. My mate John Joe, who works here, has done me a collar that we can then clamp them both together. See, they're the same size. I'm going to have to cut a bit off this pipe as well to get the collar on it. So, it's been 6 months since I recorded the footage in the first half of this video, and I thought it was probably worth giving a little Fiesta update. I never posted the rest of the video because I kind of petered out with stuff I was doing on the Fiesta, ended up using it a little bit, did a couple of other jobs on it which I'll talk to you about in a moment, but I didn't film them, so I never quite got round to uploading that video. So, thought let's do it now in January 2024 and give you a proper little update on how the Fiesta has been doing. So what have I been up to for the last 6 months with the Fiesta? Well, I think the first thing I did with it was take it to the old Ford show at Gaydon. I drove it there, which was probably the longest journey it had done. It went fine, but I didn't massively enjoy the drive. It was very, very, very loud and kind of rattly and noisy, which was a bit disappointing. So I've been busy doing a few other jobs on the car to try and improve that. The first thing is that the Clarius exhaust that you saw me fit earlier in this video onto the car was absolutely terrible. It had horrible resonance at certain levels of the rev range, so it just kind of completely resonated through the car. It was really unpleasant. So I managed to source a new old stock Ford one. It came from Italy and it had to be shipped via some family in Ireland, which is in the EU. We happened to be over for a christening, so picked up the exhaust at that point, took it back and fitted it to the car, and it's made such a difference. It's totally quietened it down. The raucousness isn't anywhere near as bad as it was, and the resonance is completely gone. There is no resonance on any sort of part of the rev range, so that's really fantastic. I'm really disappointed in the Clarius exhaust system. The fact that it didn't have the kind of the flare to fit the front pipe, and also just the quality is appalling of the sound wise. So yeah, I'm glad to have junked that. The other big mechanical job I did to this car was the clutch. The original clutch on the car was incredibly fierce. It was so hard and heavy to use that it made driving the car incredibly unpleasant. Gear changes where you would just kind of kangaroo them because it was so sharp and so difficult to control, and it just ached your leg. So got a new clutch kit and fitted that in the absolute pouring rain. It was the most miserable day ever. I don't know why I even started doing the job. I think it wasn't raining when I started. Whilst doing the clutch, we damaged the seals on the drive shaft, so we had to put new drive shaft seals on it and new gearbox oil, so at least that's all done. The other thing that I had trouble with was the tappets or the valve clearances. I couldn't set them properly. I'd set them and they seemed fine according to the book, but it just sounded horrendous. It was so incredibly tappety and noisy and just sounded like it was in pain every time you drove it. So I eventually discovered that the issue was that the rockers themselves had slightly worn, so there was a very slight sort of concaveness to them, so they weren't entirely flat. So when I was putting my feeler gauge in, I was kind of sticking it in anywhere on the sides or whatever and setting the gap with the lowest point of the rocker, which means that when it was actually touching the valve, it was sort of the middle of it was touching the valve, so my clearances were completely out. So having worked that out and realized that, I used a slightly thinner gauge of feeler gauge, if you like, more pointy ones, and did it right in the middle, exactly where the rocker sits on the valve stem. And so did that, and it now runs so much more sweetly. It just sounds a lot better and a lot happier, so I'm really delighted we got to the bottom of that one. I did come across one little issue a little bit later on, which is when I was driving along, you could just hear the engine just sounded so rough. There was like a real kind of rattle coming from it, and I really couldn't work out what it was. It took me ages and ages and ages to work out that eventually I hadn't tightened the bolts holding the alternator in place. I think in my haste at one point to put the fan belt on, or the alternator belt on, it was one of those things where I'd put it on and sort of nipped it to hold it, and then kind of thought, start the engine, make sure it's okay and tight enough, and then I would go and tighten it again the next day. Never got round to tightening it again, did I? Whoops. So the alternator was sort of flapping about. So once I tightened that up, that really stopped all the rattles, mechanical rattles that this car has. So woo. And that, I guess, brings us to some of the videos that you have seen about this car. I did a review of it on itself. I did a comparison with the Mark III and a comparison with the Metro. And in all of them, I slightly rude about how raucous it is and raw and sort of frantic the driving experience is. And although that has been improved by all of those changes I've made to it, the tappets, the alternator, the exhaust, it's still quite raw, and it isn't the most relaxing car to drive. It's very fun, it's really sporty, and I do enjoy it in that context, but for longer journeys I do find it quite tiring. For that reason, it is probably not going to be a permanent member of the Morsels and Motors fleet, so I am looking for a new home for it. I'm happy to stick with it and hold on to it for a little while, because I'm enjoying having a Mk1 Fiesta, and it is, you know, a design icon, and I love seeing it parked outside with its sort of iconic little face staring at me. So I do enjoy it, but it is probably time to move it on, particularly because there's quite a large financial outlay that lives in the value of this car that could probably do with being released, because I need that money for other projects. I might have bought a blue Cavalier, you have noticed, and also an Escort that's just there, which is going in to have a little bit of bodywork done next week. So yes, the Fiesta is for sale, sort of. So yeah, if you're interested at all in it, do give me a DM on Instagram or whatever, and see if you want to come and have a look at it. It's a great little car. I do like it. It's very, very sorted now. It runs, it's completely reliable. I would trust it to do any journey without any difficulty whatsoever, because every single thing on this car is new, effectively. Oh, it passed an MOT. That's the other thing as well. I took it for an MOT in, I think it was November, and it passed with no advisories. Other than, oh, was there an advisory on the brakes? There might have been an advisory on the brakes. Can't remember. If there was, I've done it. But it was a clean bill of health, essentially, and the tester was really, really happy with it. We went all underneath it. I went with him underneath to have a look. It's incredibly solid. It has never been welded, which is absolutely insane for a Mk1 Fiesta, which were known to be rot boxes in parts. So that's it. That brings us up to date on the Fiesta. Hopefully you've enjoyed kind of catching up on it. And I'm going to go to the supermarket and get some food in the Fiesta. See you later. Bye.